Stop the performance, Savannah. That was the last thing I heard before the world tilted sideways. My brother Hunter didn't just push me. He kicked the brake of my wheelchair with the heel of his Italian loafer and shoved. Gravity took over. I hit the stone terrace of my grandmother's estate hard. My custom titanium leg brace, $9,200 of medical engineering, shattered against the masonry with a sound like a gunshot. The white linen tablecloths fluttered in the breeze. The crystal glasses didn't even clink. And 50 of my family's closest friends just stood there watching the broken ballerina crumble. Before we see who steps out of the shadows to end this drop, a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't scream. Screaming takes breath and I didn't have any. I lay on the cold stone, my cheek pressed against the grit, trying to calibrate my own existence. I didn't cry. I didn't reach out. I just went still. You see, people think pain is a scale from 1 to 10. A paper cut is a 1. Breaking a leg is an 8. But I live with complex regional pain syndrome. It doesn't fit on that scale. Imagine your bones are made of frozen glass. Now imagine someone is taking a sledgehammer and shattering them over and over again every single second of every single day. That is my baseline. That is my Tuesday morning coffee. I had learned to mask it. I was a prima ballerina once. I knew how to smile while my toes bled inside satin shoes. I knew how to make agony look like art. But when that stage light rigging collapsed 3 years ago and crushed my spine, the curtain came down for good. To my family, my disability wasn't a tragedy. It was a public relations problem. It was an inconvenience that clashed with their aesthetic. They didn't see a survivor. They saw a prop that had stopped working. My right leg was twisted at an angle that sent lightning bolts of white-hot feedback up my sciatic nerve. The adrenaline was the only thing keeping me conscious. I focused on the texture of the stone under my hand. Cold, hard, real. This wasn't a nightmare. This was my grandmother's 80th diamond jubilee. I looked up. Hunter was standing over me, blocking out the sunday. He held a flute of champagne in one hand, not a single drop spilled. He looked down at me like I was a stain on the patio that the staff had missed. "Stop the act," he said, his voice bored. "You're ruining Grandma's jubilee." He didn't offer a hand. Instead, he turned to the crowd. The guests were frozen, clutching their pearls and their cocktails, unsure if this was a medical emergency or performance art. Hunter decided to clarify things for them. He paced around my broken body like a prosecutor closing a case. "She's high," he announced, projecting his voice to the back of the garden. "Look at her. She's nodding off. She's just doing this to get more pills." He spun a narrative out of thin air, weaving lies with the confidence of a man who has never been told no. He told them I was an opioid addict. He told them I was faking the paralysis because I couldn't handle aging out of dance. He said I was jealous of his success, of his tech startup, of his life. He painted me as a parasite feeding off the family trust, a broken thing that refused to be fixed because being broken paid better. "Look at that brace," he sneered, gesturing with his glass toward the shattered titanium around my leg. "Just a prop. She doesn't need it. She walks around her apartment just fine when she thinks nobody is watching. I've seen it." It was a lie, a blatant, provable lie. I couldn't walk to the bathroom without assistance, but the crowd nodded. They wanted to believe him. Believing him was easier than accepting that they were watching a man assault his disabled sister. If I was a villain, their silence was justified. If I was a victim, they were complicit. So they chose to believe the man in the $5,000 suit. I tried to push myself up, but my arm gave way. My mother, Patricia, finally stepped forward. But she didn't come to me. She went to the table next to me. She picked up a napkin and started dabbing at a splash of champagne on the stone where Hunter had gestured too wildly. "Hunter," she whispered, not looking at me. Not looking at her daughter sprawled on the ground. "Hunter, keep your voice down. You're making a scene." She wasn't worried about my spine. She was worried about the beverage service. The injustice of it settled in my chest, heavy and cold. It wasn't a hot anger. It was clinical. It was the final piece of data I needed. They weren't just negligent. They were actively erasing me. "Get up, Savannah," Hunter hissed, leaning down so only I could hear him. "Or I'll have security drag you out like the trash you are." I closed my eyes, preparing for the humiliation of being manhandled by the event staff. But then the air in the garden shifted. A silence fell over the crowd, heavier than before. Footsteps approached. Not the hurried scuffle of security, but the slow, deliberate click of dress shoes on stone. A shadow fell over me, but it wasn't Hunter. "That won't be necessary," a voice said. It was calm, deep, and terrified, absolutely no one until you really listened to the tone. I opened my eyes. A man in a bespoke charcoal suit had stepped out from the shadows of the pergola. He was holding a glass of champagne just like Hunter. But he wasn't drinking it. He was staring at my brother with the kind of detachment a scientist has before he dissects a specimen. It was Dr. Gregory. Hunter scoffed, looking the man up and down. "Who the hell are you?" "Another one of her drama friends." Dr. Gregory didn't answer him. He crouched down beside me, setting his glass on the ground. He didn't touch me, didn't try to move me. He just looked at my leg then, at my eyes. L4 and L5 fusion hardware intact, he stated more to himself than me. "But the tibial rotation is concerning. Savannah, blink once. If you can feel your toes." He blinked. "Good," he said. He stood up smoothly, effortlessly. He turned to face Hunter. Hunter took a step back instinctively. There was something about Dr. Gregory, an air of absolute, unshakable authority. "I'm not her friend, Dr. Gregory," said his voice, carrying to the back of the terrace without him raising it a decibel. "I am the chief of neurosurgery at Mount Sinai. I am the man who spent 14 hours inside your sister's spine 3 years ago, putting her back together with 16 screws and 2 titanium rods after the theater ceiling collapsed on her." The crowd gasped. A collective intake of breath. "I was invited here today by your grandmother, Dr. Gregory," continued, gesturing vaguely toward the matriarch who sat stone-faced at the head table. "She wanted to discuss a donation to the hospital. I've been standing in the pergola for 20 minutes. I heard everything." He took a step toward Hunter. Hunter retreated, bumping into a serving table. "You claim she is an addict?" Dr. Gregory asked. He pulled a phone from his pocket. "I prescribe her medication. I monitor her intake. She is on a non-narcotic nerve blocker because she refused opioids. She wanted to keep her head clear to work. She is in more pain right now than you have ever felt in your entire life, and she is taking nothing for it." He took another step. "You claim she is faking. You claim she walks when nobody is looking." Dr. Gregory reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it. It was a printout. "This is a log of her physical therapy attendance," he said. "She goes 4 times a week. She fights for every millimeter of movement. I have seen this woman vomit from exertion trying to move her foot 1 inch. And you stand here with your champagne and your inheritance, and you mock a courage you could not replicate in 1,000 lifetimes." He let the paper flutter to the ground. "You didn't just assault your sister's son. You assaulted my masterpiece. And I take my work very seriously." Hunter laughed. It was a nervous, wet sound, like a bubble popping in a thick liquid. He looked around the terrace trying to find an ally, but the guests were staring at the physical therapy log on the ground like it was a crime scene photo. He adjusted his cuffs, trying to regain the high ground. "It's just a piece of paper," he scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "You can print anything. It doesn't prove she's actually hurt. It just proves she's committed to the bit." Dr. Gregory didn't argue. He didn't even look annoyed. He simply reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a tablet. He tapped the screen twice, then swiped up. The massive 80-inch outdoor smart screen mounted on the stone wall of the patio, usually reserved for grandma's slideshows, flickered to life. Everyone turned. A 3-dimensional rendering appeared. It was a human spine, but it looked more like a construction site. It was a cage of metal and bone. Rods ran parallel to the columns screwed into place with hardware that looked too large to fit inside a human body. It rotated slowly on the screen, a high-definition testament to violence and reconstruction. "This is Savannah's most recent MRI taken 3 months ago," Dr. Gregory said. His voice was a flat line. "See the scarring around the L4 nerve root? That is what we call tethering. Every time she moves her right leg, scar tissue pulls directly on the central nervous system. It is the physiological equivalent of being electrocuted." He zoomed in on the image. The detail was nauseatingly clear. "You called her an addict." Dr. Gregory continued, turning back to Hunter. "You said she was nodding off. That isn't opioids, son. That is exhaustion. That is a body running on 0 reserves because it is fighting a war against its own anatomy." Hunter's face had gone pale, but his arrogance was a reflex he couldn't shut off. If it's that bad, then why isn't she better? He demanded, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. You're the big fancy surgeon. If you fixed her, why is she still in the chair? Why hasn't she progressed in 6 months? The air on the terrace dropped 10 degrees. I felt it. I felt the shift from defense to offense. Dr. Gregory looked at Hunter, and for the first time there was something like pity in his eyes. Not for Hunter, but for the sheer stupidity of the question. I am glad you asked, that Dr. Gregory said. He tapped the tablet again. The spine disappeared. In its place, a spreadsheet appeared on the giant screen. It was a log of insurance payments and denials. Red text filled the last 3 months. She stopped progressing because her physical therapy was cut from 4 days a week to 1, Dr. Gregory said. She stopped progressing because her advanced nerve stimulation treatments were canceled for non-payment. He pointed to the screen. This is the cancellation notice from Blue Cross. Dated 90 days ago. The premium health insurance policy, the one established by the family trust specifically for Savannah's recovery, was terminated. My mother, Patricia gasped. She stepped forward, her hand at her throat. Terminated? That's impossible. The trust pays it automatically. Hunter handles the accounts. Dr. Gregory swiped to the next image. It was a bank transfer log. Hunter handles the accounts indeed, Dr. Gregory said. On May 14th, the auto-pay for Savannah's medical insurance was disabled. On May 15th, a transfer of $24,000, the exact cost of her semi-annual premium, was moved from the Family Medical Trust into a private LLC called Apex Ventures. He looked at Hunter. That is your tech startup, isn't it, Hunter? The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. Hunter wasn't just a bully anymore. He was a thief. He had stolen my recovery. He had looked at my pain, at my broken spine, and decided it was a line item he could liquidate to fund his app. But Dr. Gregory wasn't done. He turned to my mother. She was staring at Hunter, her mouth opening and closing, but she wasn't looking at him with anger. She was looking at him with confusion. And that was when Dr. Gregory delivered the diagnosis that had nothing to do with bones. You are shocked, Patricia, he said, his voice dropping to a register that felt like a scalpel. But you shouldn't be. You let this happen. What? My mother whispered. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, Dr. Gregory corrected. You watched your son mock her for 2 years. You watched him belittle her pain. You let him create a narrative that she was the broken failure and he was the golden success. Do you know why? He stepped closer to her. Because every family like yours needs a black sheep. You need Savannah to be the disaster. As long as she is the broken addict, the failed dancer, the drain on resources, then you don't have to look at your own failures. You don't have to look at how you raised a son who would steal from his crippled sister. You need her to stay in that chair, Patricia. Because if she stands up, she might look you in the eye. And you couldn't handle that. My mother flinched as if he had struck her. She looked at Hunter, then at me sprawled on the stone. The cognitive dissonance was breaking. The perfect image she had curated for decades was shattering right along with my leg brace. It was alone, Hunter stammered. The confidence was leaking out of him like air from a punctured tire. He looked from the screen to our mother, then to Grandma. I was going to pay it back. Apex Ventures is going to be huge. I just needed liquidity. I was protecting the asset. Protecting the asset. That is what he called my health. An asset he could leverage. My grandmother, the matriarch who had built this family dynasty from a single dry cleaning shop into a real estate empire, finally moved. She didn't stand up. She didn't need to. She simply set her crystal goblet down on the table. The sound was soft, but it silenced the entire terrace. You stole, she said. Her voice was dry like old paper. You stole from the trust. You stole from your sister. And you did it while drinking my champagne. Grandma, it's complicated, Hunter tried stepping toward her. Stop, she said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. You have always been arrogant, Hunter. I tolerated it because I thought you were smart. But cruelty is not intelligence. Cruelty is a liability, and I do not keep liabilities on my ledger. She turned her head slightly to the man standing behind her chair, her personal attorney, who never left her side at these functions. Arthur, execute the contingency clause. Hunter is removed from the trust. Effective immediately. Revoke his access to the properties, the accounts, and the family legal counsel. Hunter's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the edge of the table to stay upright. You can't do that, he choked out. That's millions. That's my future. You spent your future, Grandma said, turning her gaze back to the garden, dismissing him entirely. You spent it buying the silence of your conscience. And now, you are overdrawn. Hunter spun around looking for anyone to save him. He looked at Dr. Gregory. This is slander, he hissed. You can't prove any of this. I'll sue you. I'll sue the hospital. Dr. Gregory didn't blink. He reached into his jacket one last time and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. I was hoping you would say that, Dr. Gregory said. He stepped forward and slapped the envelope against Hunter's chest. Hunter grabbed it reflexively. That is a summons, Dr. Gregory said. You are being sued for battery assault of a disabled person and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We are also seeking punitive damages for the theft of the insurance funds. Oh, and the invoice for the custom titanium brace you just destroyed is on the first page. $9,200. Plus tax. Hunter stared at the envelope. I called the police 10 minutes ago, Dr. Gregory added, checking his watch. They should be arriving at the gate right about now. Aggravated assault is a felony in this state, Hunter. Especially when there is video evidence. As if on cue, the wail of sirens cut through the humid air, getting louder, closer. The reality of it finally hit Hunter. The money was gone. The protection was gone. The narrative was gone. He turned to our mother. His eyes were wide, wet, terrified. He looked like the little boy who used to break vases. And blame me, only this time the pieces were too big to hide. Mom, he pleaded. Mom, tell them. Tell them I'm a good person. Don't let them do this. Patricia looked at him. Then she looked at me. She looked at the twisted angle of my leg, at the bruises forming on my arms, at the man who had stood up for me when she wouldn't. She looked at the 3D rendering of my spine on the screen, the evidence of the pain she had ignored for 3 years because it was easier to look away. I saw the struggle in her face. The habit of enabling him was a deep groove in her brain. But then she looked at Dr. Gregory, who was watching her with an expression of clinical expectation. Mom, please, Hunter screamed. The sirens were at the driveway. Patricia took a breath. She straightened her spine. She didn't look at Hunter. She looked at the horizon. I can't help you, Hunter, she said, her voice trembling but clear. You're on your own. She turned her back on him. The lawsuit was settled out of court 6 months later. The final number was $285,000. It wasn't a lottery win. It was a calculation. It covered the cost of the surgeries to repair the damage from the fall. It covered the reimbursement of the stolen insurance premiums. It covered the cost of my new apartment, a ground-floor unit with wide doors, smart ramps, and a bathroom designed for dignity, not struggle. Hunter liquidated his assets to pay it. Apex Ventures filed for bankruptcy. He avoided jail time by pleading no contest to a lesser charge of reckless endangerment, but the felony conviction meant his days in high finance and tech startups were over. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation and 500 hours of community service. For the first time in my life, I had silence. Not the silence of being ignored, but the silence of safety. I didn't have to perform wellness anymore. I didn't have to smile through the nerve pain to make others comfortable. I cut ties with my mother for a year. I needed to heal without the weight of her guilt hanging on my frame. Dr. Gregory remained my surgeon, but he also became something else, a reminder that there are people in this world who will use their power to shield you, not crush you. I sat on my patio 3 years later watching the sun dip below the city skyline. My leg was in a brace, but it was a new one, lighter, stronger. I could walk short distances now. The nerve stimulation treatments fully funded by the settlement had given me back 30% of my mobility. It doesn't sound like much, but 30% is the difference between being a prisoner in your own body and being a resident. The intercom buzzed. I checked the camera. It was Hunter. He looked different. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by a simple button-down and jeans. He looked tired. He looked older. He looked like a man who had spent 3 years learning that the world doesn't owe him a living. I buzzed him in. He stood at my door holding 2 coffees. He didn't try to hug me. He didn't try to come in until I stepped back. Hi, Savannah, he said. Hi, Hunter. He set the coffees on the table. He sat down, keeping a respectful distance. I finished my community service last week, he said. I've been working at a logistics warehouse. It's hard work. My back kills me every day. He paused, a wry smile touching his lips. I know. I have no right to complain about back pain to you. You really don't, I said, taking a sip of the coffee. It was my order. Exact. Oat milk, 2 pumps of vanilla. I wanted to ask you something, he said, his voice dropping. I wanted to ask if you could ever forgive me. Not for the lawsuit, not for the money, but for being a brother who tried to break his sister because he was too weak to carry his own failures. I looked at him. I looked for the arrogance, the entitlement. It wasn't there. It had been burned away by consequences. Forgiveness is a tricky word, I said. People think it's a feeling. They think it's a warm light that washes over you and erases the past. But it isn't. I set my coffee down. Forgiveness is a transaction, Hunter. It is the receipt you get when you pay the price of the ticket back. He looked confused. The price? The price is change, I said. Meaningful, consistent, long-term change. You don't get forgiveness because you said sorry. You get it because you became a person who wouldn't do it again. You paid the debt. You took the punishment. You lost the money, the status, the ego. You spent 3 years humbled. I looked at his hands calloused from manual labor. You paid the price of the ticket back into my life. So, yes, I forgive you. But that doesn't mean I forget. It means I'm willing to see who you are now, instead of who you were then. Hunter nodded slowly. He didn't cry. He just closed his eyes and let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for 3 years. Thank you, he whispered. We sat there as the sun went down, 2 siblings with broken histories drinking coffee in the quiet. I wasn't the ballerina anymore. I would never be on stage again. But I had something better than applause. I had the truth. And I had the power to define my own worth in a currency that no one could ever steal again.